On this episode of Just Informed Talk, Astoria lights up as arc flashes are reported which light up the sky blue. Now, were there drones seen in the area right before this incident? Plus, there were 911 outages that followed that, but they weren't just 911 outages. They were much, much more. Hi, I'm Craig, and welcome to Just Informed Talk. I always like to start by saying thank you to all my subscribers. If you guys haven't, please come here on the landing page, click the big red subscribe button, make sure you hit the bell for notifications so you're notified when these videos get posted. So, that's today's video. Like, there is an incredible amount of information we're going to go over. Here's where we left off in the latest Q Post 2642. That was on December 22nd. We are still waiting. Guys, I have a very, very good feeling that on or before January 1st, we are going to hear from Q, and it's going to be about some incredible developments that are going to be taking place coming up in the future. As we've talked about before, we have executive orders coming into effect. We have all of this stuff. Plus, if you guys want to figure out, get caught up, and you want to see some interesting stuff, I would encourage you to come back here, watch these last few videos, and watch this one in particular, because this is a speech that President Trump delivered to the troops, and I brought it to you guys because it's an important speech to listen to. There is so much information in there, including parts where President Trump, he does the hand motion that looks kind of like the Q. I'm not saying it is, but also there was an incredible message to our enemies that made an explicit statement that if anything was tried, that they would be met with the full force of the United States in its full capacity. So that is a video you guys need to go watch. It's got incredible moments with President Trump and the troops, which are really important for us to share with one another and get that word out there. And if you're scratching your head going, what is QAnon and what's this guy talking about? Watch this video right here. It'll explain everything you need to know about QAnon and the Great Awakening, and everything that you want to get that info for, as far as research, where to find the information, and how to do it. Go here and you'll find that out. So I always encourage people to do that. But today's story starts here in New York City. Okay, we have this Astoria Borealis is what they've dubbed it, but it's this bright blue night light in the sky, which has been caused by an electrical explosion. So the story goes on. If you guys haven't seen these pictures yet, they're actually pretty incredible. People in New York City were basically stunned on the 28th, which was a couple nights ago, to see the night sky turn blue. Now, the official explanation was that there was basically it says, this is from Con Edison, which is the power company that's in charge of power in that area. They say, last night's electrical fault caused a sustained electrical arc flash and transmission disturbance. There were no injuries, and all the power lines serving the area are stable. We apologize for the disruption to the customers, and then it shows where the photos from. But this story is actually, there's maybe a lot more to it than just meeting the eye. Now, a lot of different reports have been going on around the internet, and I've been enjoying my Christmas break somewhat, trying to post content, but also trying to be with family. And, I'm back in the seat now, and I'm really been trying to catch up on everything that happened here. But this is pretty incredible. There's been a lot of stuff. So first of all, let's think about this and what happened. This Con Edison, it was a power station apparently. Some of the power transformers started to have arc flashes, and it made this incredible light that lit up the sky. And you guys can see it right here. But there was some pretty weird and suspicious stuff that was going on just beforehand. Now, this was brought to my attention by somebody who has been obviously watching the show for a while and is always helping out with a very helpful information. And they pointed this one out to me, which was actually, I think this was retweeted by Lionel over at Lionel Nation. But this was originally posted by this guy at Graves, or at Grave5, this guy Don. And this was from 8:52 p.m. on the 27th, when the actual flashes were happening, or just before, I would presume. Now, that being said, there was some interesting stuff. So you guys are going to want to go ahead and watch this as we talk through it. Now, I'm going to kind of make this into a full screen here so you guys can see But what you're seeing is this looking at downtown New York, and it looks like there's a bunch of drones or some sort of formation of lights in the sky. I'm gonna guess those are drones, and I've seen a lot of drone light shows and drone Christmas shows. So to me, it's not necessarily any proof of anything, and it's basically a pretty tough video to make out. And to me, bringing it to my attention is okay. I don't know what it means. I don't know what that really was. It was very weird, and the way that worked was kind of, if you guys saw that flash there at the end, that was a little bit strange. But I'm not an expert on like these kind of aerial phenomena. So all I know is that this video was posted and it's saying what's going on, and that was basically the whole video. Now, that being said, this was all happening apparently before the actual arc flash that took place in New York City. Is there a correlation? Well, obviously, if you look at things that Q's told us in the past, back on January 22nd, 2018, right, so almost a year ago, basically Q said in two posts that were in a span of a few minutes from one another, saying that drones were over the U.S. and tracking only, right? And then it says drones over the U.S. tracking only, and it has this kill box here, which to me I thought meant that they closed that down, that they were using drones over the U.S. to basically spy on our own population, and they shut that program down because obviously that's a complete violation of our rights as citizens. So that being said, though, somebody else wanted me to look at the post that we have. This was from back in the day. It's just connecting this guy, David Soloff, and a comment that he made, which obviously seems to be kind of like in jest on Twitter, to a guy who was basically accusing him of, being in bed with the Clintons and so on and so forth. I haven't been able to get enough research in on this. It's been a while since I've covered this topic. This was from a while ago. But if you guys are out there doing the research for yourselves, I want you to look up if there's any connections between any of this. But it's a comment from David Soloff to a guy where he says basically, we control all the drones in the world, so we will send them all to the Redditors, or to all of the Redditors, don't worry, which obviously is a comment that looks like it's put out in jest and it's not meant to be taken seriously. I don't think anyone would be stupid enough to make that kind of comment. But the fact is, sometimes these people are stupid enough to make comments that, it's hide it in plain sight, right? Is to just say it as if it's a joke, when in reality, there's something more to it. Now, after a set of mysterious accidents, I'm not going to connect this guy to anything other than to say that this was brought to my attention. So I thought I'd bring it to your guys' attention. If you guys have any thoughts on this, please leave them down in the comments. Now, with that, this takes us into the next story, right? So the next story obviously is about CenturyLink. Well, what happened here? CenturyLink is a very big company, and they have this huge outage that happened where basically they lost all the 911 service in a bunch of different areas, was knocked out. And this actually affected many different systems. It affected patient hospital records. It affected prisons and schools. And, it had a huge rippling effect because, and I remember this because CenturyLink is actually, I think they've acquired Verizon, right? And this to me happened. I was actually there. I was trying to use my cell phone that day, and I couldn't use it, and it was pretty crazy. I kept dropping calls. I had no access to the internet. Now, what is this all about? Well, there is this one person out there who has tied a lot of this together, and I want to share his research with you guys, giving him the credit, obviously, but there is a lot of information here that I want to cover with you guys. So we're going to jump right into this kind of analysis by somebody over on Twitter called @40head or 40_head. And basically, I'm going to read through his tweets, and I'm going to let you guys decide for yourself what you think, because I read through this, and some of this actually makes sense. Some of it, maybe not as much, but I'm going to leave that for you guys. I'm going to share the information with you because I think that's what's most important, is getting the information out there to have a public dialogue about it, right? So basically what he starts off by saying is that, are you kidding me? Yesterday's 911 outage exposed a major deep state player, the Keystone. So what is the Keystone? So the second thing he says here is POTUS opened the door of all doors. Expand your thinking. What is the keystone? And of course, Q told us back in Drop 271 that the keystone is military intelligence, and no such agency is the key, and POTUS and the Patriots are the stone. So the keystone is basically the connection between the military intelligence, the NSA, and the people as far as getting information around the mainstream media, which has become this globalist propaganda monolith, and that is what this whole thing is about, right? And it talks about Admiral Rogers and the NSA and President Trump and the U.S. military, and they're going to apply the keystone and paint the picture, right? Which means that they're going around the mainstream media, things like QAnon and other ways, to hit President Trump's own Twitter. And they're telling us the truth about what's going on because the media won't report it. And that's where we've come to, folks. I mean, truly. Obviously, this is coming down here. It says he starts talking about, or they start talking about in the post. So yesterday's 911 system outage downplayed all over the place. Fact is, folks, even that are saying how significant of an attack it was or not. Telling you the whole story. I just posted that this attack hit tons of services throughout the entire United States. Emergency dispatch services, hospitals, prisons, schools, etc. Multiple victims in what CenturyLink called a network element. So he tweets out here what he links to this article, which basically just talks about how, the one we were just looking at, where it talks about how CenturyLink knocked out more than just 911 calls, right? Which we all know if we were actually doing it. But what he says in his, or what they say in their tweet is that it hit way more than just those places. That CenturyLink, the one who was really hit, is some connection with the DoD and some sort of dark fiber contractor. All right. So, meaning that there was something that was hit, right? And that's what you have to remember as we read forward. So the next one, and these are, if you see the numbering here, it's just the way it's like tweets. Each one's a tweet. So we're going through the tweets, and it's up here on Threadreader app, which is, if you guys don't know, Threadreader app's like a way to post content, kind of like Imgur, but for threads. Anyway, it says, but realize just how controlled this hit was. It caused disruption to emergency services, but the emergency broadcast system set up by POTUS early in his presidency worked just fine, notifying the majority of citizens of alternate numbers to 911 in case of emergency. Hospitals weren't shut down. They just had to use pen and paper for a while. Prisons weren't unlocked and gates open. They just had to use radios instead of the phones. Schools had to have runners go to classrooms instead of using designated call systems. It was safe. That's a major tell, folks. Do you imagine Russia, China, North Korea, or any of the rest of the enemies of America, the fake news media tries to scare us about, would have been that reserved and a hit on the U.S. system? But it won't retract from eventually blaming them, I bet. So this one's kind of a cool point that he's making, or a true point, not cool, I guess, but it's an interesting point, I guess I would say, that whatever this was, right, this big, outage and these mysterious arc flashes and all of these drones and all this weird stuff, that there is most likely going to end up being a push to blame it on, obviously, the boogeymen that are presented to us every day by the mainstream media in order to keep us, afraid. But that's what I think he's saying. I thought it was an interesting point. I'm just sharing it with you. The next one here says, he talks about how he posts a thread which talks about Hillary Clinton, Bill Clinton, Clinton Foundation, and the Chinese. And then it talks about how basically there's this ongoing battle going on behind the scenes between China and the United States, which talks about how President Trump has waged war against Huawei and ZTE because it spells out major exposure of the deep state money and the illegal campaign financing in a Chinese billionaire, James Riotti, and his Lippo group. So it's all tying these things together, saying that this is where a lot of the money was being funneled through in this whole corruption, the alleged corruption that was going on between the Clinton Foundation and China. Okay, this is just allegations. This is pure conjecture at this point. Besides what facts we have to point to the connections between the Clinton Foundation and Chinese, which already exist. This is actually just taking that to the next step and saying that there is something more here. And it kind of sums it up perfectly here in this tweet saying, U.S. detains Huawei CFO in Canada, arrests Chinese intelligence officer Yan Junzhu in Belgium, extradites to U.S. China hits U.S. intel providers. Google, China, Dragonfly op fails after POTUS interference. China attack on CenturyLink 911 services, possibly DoD dark fiber services. So you see, like, it's kind of the tit for tat here that we're seeing. Is this true? I don't know. I'm just showing you this person's research, and I'm letting you guys decide for yourself. Right. But going on to say, basically the rest of this talks about how CenturyLink's a huge company. It's got a lot of people involved who are supposedly deep state, according to this individual. And they work with things like schools, lottery systems, banking, all that stuff, and banking communications. And then it kind of goes into who owns CenturyLink and what that has to do with the fact that we have an upcoming speech from, you guessed it. So what it talks about is this Riyadi, who's a billionaire in his company, who has a big stake in CenturyLink, who also helped start Alibaba Group, which, by the way, if you guys didn't know, is connected to the company that they're connected to is this Temasek, which has shares of Gilead, which is a pharmaceutical corporation, which did the deals with the Clinton Foundation, which actually had the tainted HIV medicine. It really gets pretty convoluted when you keep going further into it. But there is something very interesting, right? There is something very interesting about all this. The way it's all written, and I think it's an interesting point here, where it talks about how CenturyLink is co-controlled by Vanguard, who have significant, if not controlling, shares of Apple, Microsoft, Amazon, Johnson & Johnson, JP Morgan Chase, and it's talking about how these companies are all interconnected, right? But it says, do you grasp what that means? The major and most vital communication systems in America, the keystone, is controlled by the deep state corporations, which we already knew. So it talks about how big CenturyLink is, and basically then it goes on to talk about how they have all these government contracts, and they've been working with this dark wire or whatever it is for the DoD. And one of the most interesting parts was, to me, right here, where it talks about Alibaba is kicking off, because it goes on to connect it to Verizon, and then it talks about how they have a monopoly on the information. And so it talks about how Alibaba, though, who's connected in all this, is going to have a AliFest conference in Hangzhou, China, next week with a star-studded lineup of speakers to help celebrate its 10th anniversary, with the keynote presenters at the summit to include President Bill Clinton. Yep, not making that up. It says here it says, did you get that? Yeah. So this is just another example of everything that we've been looking at that's telling us, okay, what's going on here? How are these all connected? It says these massive corporations have fingers in nearly every country, working behind the scenes to control, to manipulate, and to monitor communications. What has POTUS and Q done? They've taken us to the back channels. They're rescuing the keystone, right? So there's been a relentless effort to extend this monitoring and control by CenturyLink, aka the deep state, as it's written here in this article. By our government officials, Congress issued the contracts to these players. Everything is monitored, recorded, and controlled purposefully. So what is the keystone? It is our central ability to communicate unrestricted. What does that sound like, folks? The keystone is the First Amendment of the Constitution of the United States. It is the key that all other rights hinge on. It is our most precious right. So I think what he says here is pretty interesting too. It says the QAnon movement solidifies the backdoor channels to free speech, like what I'm doing right now, and myself as well. I'm doing his best. He says he's doing his best to research, learn, compile, and inform the rest of you. And talks about he's going to get shadow banned. So I don't know. Go check him out over on Twitter. But I thought that was such an interesting put together. Sometimes these Twitter threads can be quite interesting, and that was just an interesting way of looking at it that I wanted to share with you guys, because obviously when you start, is there more here? I mean, that's really what it comes down to is there more here? And this is something I wanted to share with you guys because I thought it summed a lot of things up that I wanted to cover, and it kind of tied some things together that I thought were interesting ideas. But I'm going to leave that to you guys to kick around in the comments, and you guys can tell me what you think about it all. I just wanted to share it with you. And also, before we go, I'm going to take some time to do one of my favorite segments here on the show, which is basically reacting to President Trump's tweets and sharing them with you because I think that they need to be shared as many people as we can. Now, this is a tweet from President Trump on the 28th, which is right after or right during all this stuff that was happening that we're talking about, where President Trump says, "We will be forced to close the southern border entirely if the obstructionist Democrats do not give us the money to finish the wall and also change the ridiculous immigration laws that our country is saddled with. Hard to believe there was a Congress and president who would approve." And then it says, "The United States loses," and I think it was like purposely like loses so much after money on trade with Mexico under NAFTA, over $75 billion a year, not including drug money, which would be many times that amount, that I would consider closing the southern border a profit-making operation. We will build a wall, or the United States will close the southern border, bring our car industry back in the United States where it belongs, go back to pre-NAFTA before so many of our companies and jobs were so foolishly sent to Mexico. Either we finish the wall, or we close the border. Honduras, Guatemala, and El Salvador are doing nothing for the United States but taking our money. Word is that a new caravan is forming in Honduras, and they are doing nothing about it. We will be cutting off all aid to these three countries, taking advantage of the U.S. for years. So leave it to President Trump to sum things up perfectly. So now we have a new caravan forming, of course. Why wouldn't we? Because if they can send one up, then they're going to send another, and they're going to send another, and they're going to send another, right? So we have that happening down in Honduras and Guatemala and El Salvador. At the same time, we have the Democrats refusing to fund this wall. And President Trump's basically saying, we're going to close the border over this. Especially with what's happened. I mean, look at what happened out in California where that poor police officer lost his life to an illegal immigrant who shouldn't have been here in the first place, who was a criminal, who had warrants, who shouldn't have been in this country to begin with. He actually took the life of a good man who was obviously working, presumably a good man. I don't really know who he was, other than every report I've read says that he was an honorable, decent cop who was basically putting his life on the line and actually ended up losing it to some really unfortunate circumstances, as we see. But guys, I really think that this border wall issue has to be addressed. I think it's addressing multitude of different issues. It's not just about illegals coming into our country, guys. It's about criminals coming in. It's about terrorists. It's about smuggling of drugs and smuggling of money. And you can actually, think about it. I've said this before. Think about what you can do now with these Bitcoins and stuff. You can smuggle a flash drive into this country that has millions of dollars on it and use it for anything you want, right? Influence, corruption, power. There is so much that we, I think as a nation, don't even realize can happen with a border that is not secured. And that's just one example, not to mention the illegal drugs, the illegal weapons, the illegal criminals. There's a huge reason for wanting border security, and I think President Trump highlights that perfectly. Now, here's another one that I think deserves so much more attention. We're going to probably be covering this a lot coming in the future, but I'm going to read President Trump's tweet, and I'm going to talk about it for 2 seconds. But it says, the Mueller angry Democrats recently deleted approximately 19,000 text messages between FBI agent Lisa Page and her lover, Agent Peter Strzok. These texts were asked for and invaluable to the truth of the witch hunt hoax. This is a total obstruction of justice, all texts demanded. And I couldn't agree more. What right in any world does the FBI have, or any organizations for that matter, to delete what's supposed to be kept in the public record that could actually indicate that there was a hoax conducted against the president at the highest level when it comes to this Russian investigation, right? And is it not obstruction of justice to destroy evidence that could implicate those involved? And it could be the same people who are conducting this investigation who could be the ones implicated by this evidence that has been deleted. So that to me is like, my head just wants to explode, because I'm like, what in the world are we doing here where we're allowing this kind of craziness to take place, especially the FBI, one of our most trusted law enforcement agencies in the country, or if not the, now it's losing its credibility more and more every day when it makes decisions like this, and it undermines the sanctity and the equality of law in our country by making this basically this two-tier system where there's one set of rules and regulations and laws that are to be complied with by the political elite, the politically connected, the rich, whatever you want to call it, those who have these secret societies that they go sit at, and they have their globalist society organizations, whatever, the Open Society Foundations, all this stuff. That to me is what we're kind of up against here, and the fact that our own FBI is deleting text messages, it baffles me. I don't understand how there's any reasonable precedent for deleting information that could be very pertinent to an ongoing investigation. That doesn't make sense to me. So I don't know, maybe if it makes sense to you guys, let me know what you think, right? And of course, here's another great one. It says, President Trump says, I am in the White House waiting for the Democrats to come on over and make a deal on border security. From what I hear, they are spending so much time on presidential harassment that they have little time left for things like stopping crime and our military. Truer words could not have been spoken. I think the Democrats are so busy right now planning how they're going to launch a multitude of investigations as soon as they take control of the House, and they're going to do their best to impeach the president. That's what they're focused on, because you know what? To them, that's all that matters. It's not about helping our country. It's not about making America great. It's not about rebuilding our infrastructure, investing in our future and doing what's right. No. It's this kabuki, this political theater of we have to impeach the president to show the world that we're still in control. Well, you know what? I'm getting pretty sick and tired of this. It's the same thing over and over again. And these Democrats eventually, you know what? They're going to expose themselves for what they really are. Because obviously, all you have to do is watch what's happened, and in your own heart, what's actually going on here, guys. It's pretty incredible that they have the gall and audacity to do that. So that's what's happening next. Of course, President Trump does this tweet out about China. Now, interesting enough, it says, just had a long, very good call with President Xi of China. Deal is moving along very well. If made, it will be very comprehensive, covering all subjects, areas, and points of dispute. Big progress being made. So I think that's obviously just hopefully a step in the right direction. We'll have to wait and see. Now, that's pretty much where I'm going to leave it. There's here's the last one, which I'll read because it's from Jesse Waters, right? It says, quote, President Trump's quoting Jesse Waters saying, quote, it turns out to be true now that the Department of Justice and the FBI under President Obama rigged the investigation for Hillary and really turned the screws on Trump. And now it looks like in a corrupt and illegal way. The facts are out now. Whole hoax exposed. Exactly. I mean, guys, it's all right here. If you guys don't understand all of this, you have to kind of get the fact that they never thought she would lose. I mean, that's really what Q's been telling us for this whole time. They never thought Hillary would lose. So they didn't really have an effective way to keep President Trump from getting his presidential daily briefings about everything that's happening. They couldn't find a way to stop Admiral Rogers from visiting President Trump in Trump Tower right before he was about to become president, and to tell him about all this illegal stuff that had been going on against him and his incoming administration. There's just so much to this story that it was basically because they never thought she would lose. They were out there talking about insurance plans and what they're going to do in case President Trump did win. And that's what these texts from Peter Strzok and Lisa Page will probably end up showing us, is that they had much more animos toward the president and premeditation when it comes to setting this whole Russia hoax thing into effect through their actions as investigators. And going back to the Hillary Clinton emails, it's so clear to me now looking back. I guess hindsight's always 2020, but it's like the emails are just, that is the symptom. The real root cause and what's really wrong is the Clinton Foundation, and that's where we need to focus our attention. What was the Clinton Foundation doing? Who did they have information on? Who were they selling information to? Who were they bartering in political power with? These are the questions that we need to answer. These are the things that are going to be coming out in the future, and I can't wait to see what happens because we're only here to seek the truth. And that's what this all is. I mean, that's what everything we do here is. We're just trying to circumvent the mainstream media to present an alternate opinion or narrative that is just as plausible as the one they try to shove down our throats every day on national TV, right? Except we're doing this kind of like online in these huge forums with the whole world watching. And we can get some people get more views than some of the mainstream media networks. But that's what we are. We are the keystone. We are the ones who are going to be going around the mainstream media and getting this information out into the world. And I'm just blessed to be here and able to share this information with you guys. So with that, I want to say thank you guys for watching. Stick around for 1 minute. There's a few ways you can help out the channel. The best way to do is come here, click the big red subscribe button, make sure the bell for notifications, watch these videos, share these videos. Make sure that you come here and always leave your thoughts, theories, and insights down in the comments at the end of this video because I want to hear what you guys have to think about everything that we talked about today, especially some of the things that I specifically asked you guys to comment on because I'd love to hear your opinion. Another couple ways you can help out the channel are pretty easy. You can come over here to patreon.com. It's patreon.com. Search JUSTINFORMED Talk. When you come here, you click this button and become a patron. And it's a monthly donation. You set it and forget it, and you know that you're helping create this content. Yes, demonetization is very real. Yes, I do need you guys' help. And yes, I am super thankful for all your support over here on Patreon. And thank you for giving monthly. And for all of you guys who do that, I really appreciate it. But thank you for supporting this channel. Also, if you guys don't want to do the monthly thing, I totally understand. That's why I set up this GoFundMe page. Links to both those will be in the description if you guys want to check them out. Another great way to help out the channel is to come find me over here on Twitter at Justin_formed. You get all my cool tweets. There's some interesting stuff here, guys. You watch some of these things, right? Like, for instance, this guy, this is a new big story. Have you seen this video of this guy having a meltdown at a vape shop because the guy was going in there to get a vape juice or something, you know, those vaporizers that you use if you smoke, I guess. But the guy went in there to do that, and he had a Trump shirt on and a Make America Great Again hat. And this guy who's working behind the counter just has a complete meltdown. And to me, it's the epitome of Trump derangement syndrome. But that's just one example of the stuff that I like to share over here on Twitter. I'm trying to become much more active on my Twitter account. So if you guys are following, you'll notice that I'm posting a lot more tweets. And I want you guys to come check it out. So go over there and check out JUSTINFORMED Talk on Twitter, which is at Justin_formed, as you can see right there. So before we go, though, there is one more thing I want to talk about, and it's the most important thing, and it's God's grace and how it is truly greater. As you know, we end every episode with a piece of scripture because I don't want to just focus on the negative. I always want to remind everyone at the end about the glorious grace that God has and has in store for you, the blessings that are there, and how your eternal salvation has already been bought and paid for with the blood of our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. But for that, I want to share this. It's a positive verse, but it talks about how we should look to God. And to me, I do look to God. I ask God, make me your most humble servant so that I may be the man that the world deserves, be the man that you deserve so I can be the man that the world deserves, right? And this is one of those verses that really reminds me of that prayer I like to say often, which is Psalm 123, and we're going to read it in its entirety. And it says, I lift my eyes to you, the one enthroned in heaven, like a servant's eyes on his master's hand, like a servant girl's eyes on her mistress's hand. So our eyes are on the Lord our God until he shows us favor. Show us favor, Lord. Show us favor, for we've had more than enough contempt. We've had more than enough scorn from the arrogant and contempt from the proud. And that truly sums it all up about how to look to the Lord. Like I say, when I say my prayers, I'm always looking to God to just come into my heart so I can be a better man for the world. Because, and for God first, because I know that if I put my life to God and He gives me the tools to become a better man, then all of the contempt that is thrown our way, all of the scorn from the arrogant, and all of the contempt from the proud, all of that can just roll right off your back, because you know that you have your eternal salvation. You know that you have the Lord on your side, and you put your life to Him. And in doing so, that burden is lifted from your back. You know, you're not carrying that weight anymore. So remember to take that out into the world and know that God absolutely loves you, that you are forgiven, you are saved, you are redeemed, you have your eternal salvation. All you have to do is go out and reach out to God and open up that relationship and become closer, because there's so much that God has in store for you, that I pray that each and every one of you go and find whatever that may be. So with that, I'm going to leave it there. I want to say thank you for watching this episode of Just Informed Talk. Remember, if you haven't hit that subscribe button, now's a great time. Come here, click the big red subscribe button. But other than that, that's going to be it for me. I want to say thanks for watching Just Informed Talk. My name is Craig. Godspeed and God bless each and every one of you, Patriots.